this morning. Good morning. You're welcome. I'm Vince, if you haven't met me. Morning. Zoomers, if there's anyone there as well, or YouTubers. I'm calling to this morning's talk, Fear Choice. Fear Choice. And we're in Isaiah. Last week, Claire did a stonking job of looking at that extraordinary vision that Isaiah had in his calling in Isaiah 6. And we're now picking up the narrative in the next chapter, but in the timeline, we're probably 7 years later than that occasion. So it's not like, the next day. And Isaiah, who has been commissioned by God to speak into the nation, is caught up with a national crisis that is going on. Ahaz is the king of Judah, and he's a particularly bad king, and he is facing two armies that are coming down from the north. So we'll pick up the narrative in Isaiah 7 verse 1, chapter 7 verse 1. And it says this: When Ahaz, son of Jotham, son of Uzziah, was king of Judah, King Rezin of Aram, that's like Syria now, and Pekah, son of Remaliah, king of Israel, marched up to fight against Jerusalem, but they couldn't overpower it. Now the house of David, that's that's the Judah. Now the house of David was told, Aram has allied itself with Ephraim, so the hearts of Ahaz and his people were shaken, as the trees of the forest are shaken by the wind. So the situation is, this king and his city is facing something, and it is terrifying. He says it's like they're being shaken by the wind. They were caught with a fear that absolutely gripped them. National emergency, war, subjugation, difficulty. It is terrifying. And that's the situation that Isaiah is called to prophesy into. Then the Lord said to Isaiah, go out, you and your son Shear-Jashub, to meet Ahaz at the aqueduct of the upper pool on the road to the launderer's field. Fascinatingly, 33 years later, Isaiah is called to do exactly the same thing with Ahaz's son, Hezekiah, in exactly the same place, the aqueduct of the upper pool on the road to the launderer's field. Anyway, say to him, and this is what God is speaking into this context of national stress, anxiety, and fear. Say to him, be careful, keep calm, and don't be afraid. Do not lose heart because of these two smouldering stubs of firewood. That's not very complimentary. Because of the fierce anger of Rezin and Aram and of the son of Remaliah. Aram, Ephraim, and Remaliah's son have plotted your ruin, saying, let's invade Judah, let's tear it apart and divide it amongst ourselves and make son of Tabeel king over it. Yet this is what the sovereign Lord says. It will not take place. It will not happen. And it goes on to explain, for the head of Aram is Damascus, and the head of Damascus is only Rezin. Within 65 years, Ephraim will be too shattered to be a people. The head of Ephraim is Samaria, and the head of Samaria is only Remaliah's sons. If you do not stand firm in your faith, you will not stand at all. So without anything to reinforce this, Isaiah just brings a word. So there's nothing substantial in it. There's no army that's going to come and rescue them. There's no change of plan from his opponents. All he's told to do is don't fear. Don't fear. Don't come into this. And he has got a choice to either take what God is saying at face value and do what he's told, or take things into his own hands and find another way forward. We'll see what's going to happen. Again, the Lord said to Ahaz, ask the Lord your God for a sign, whether it's in the deepest depths or the highest heights. So there's nothing much substantial here, but Isaiah is saying, go on, ask. And this is so often happens with people that aren't walking close with God. If they have a spiritual moment, they get all pious. Oh, I couldn't possibly. Oh, no. And he says, I will not ask. I won't put the Lord to the test. The Lord's just asked him to be put to the... Oh, no, I couldn't. He's holier than God, if you like. Doesn't put him to the test. Then Isaiah said, hear now, you house of David, is it not enough to try the patience of human? Will you try the patience of my God also? There, you're going to get a sign anyway. Therefore, the Lord himself will give you a sign. The virgin will conceive and give birth to a son and will call him Immanuel. Do you know what Immanuel means? It means God with us. He will be eating curds and honey when he knows enough to reject the wrong and choose the right. For before the boy knows enough to reject the wrong and choose the right, the land of the two kings you dread will be laid waste. So what is going on here? Isaiah is speaking into King Ahaz against this fear. And he's saying, don't come under it. Don't come under it. The difficulty facing you will get resolved. It will happen. Don't partner with it or let it come in. Now we'll see in a minute what Ahaz does about this, because he has got a choice now. He can take God and Isaiah at their word, or he can try and do something about it. Fear is extraordinarily powerful, and it motivates and determines people's actions probably far more than we realize. And it was never part of the original context that God made for humanity. In the garden before the fall, there was no fear. It didn't exist. I don't understand this concept. It was a place of total security, safety, well-being, relationship, provision without labor. And yet, when God explained to Adam and Eve the consequence of stepping outside his remit, the day you eat fruit, you shall surely die. And they go ahead and do that. Genesis 3:10, Adam says this, and this is the first time this emotion has been experienced by humanity: I was afraid. He'd stepped out of what God had planned. It wasn't in God's heart. I was afraid. And it's interesting, because what? Because I disobeyed you, because I did something wrong, because I made an action of which I was guilty about? No, because it was deeper than that, because I was naked. I'm not afraid of something I've done. I'm afraid of who I am before you. I'm unclothed. I was naked. So what did I do? So I hid. The consequence of man choosing the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, taking things back into its own hands, trying to sort out, breaking relationship with God, is fear, is shame. Because Genesis 2:25 says, Adam and his wife were both naked and they felt no shame. There was no shame in the garden, no fear. Take the fruit, realize what's going on. Fear, shame, hiding, and that dislocation that happens. Right back at the garden, God, in response to this, to protect humanity, he says, right, you've trusted the serpent. Eve, you listened to the serpent. You were supposed to have dominion over the serpent, but I've now got to warn you against the serpent. I'm actually going to put enmity between you two, between the snake and humanity. I'm going to put warfare, hatred, fear, if you like. I'm going to introduce that where it hasn't been before, so you are guarded against this one. You didn't need to be guarded before, because if you're obeying me, there was nothing to fear. As long as he had no authority, he couldn't get his way in. But now you're listening, I've actually got to show you that there is something to be frightened of. And fear came in, and fear has gripped and affected so many people's lives since then that we come under fear and we respond out of fear to stuff. So isn't it interesting? When God chooses a nation or starts to form a nation, that in Genesis 15:1, when he's called Abraham, but he says, do not fear, because I am with you. I will be your shield and your very great reward. God calls him, and the first thing he says, or one of the first things he says, he calls him out and all the rest of it. But then later, after he's done the Melchizedek thing in Genesis 15, he's come back from battle, and the Lord says to Abraham, don't fear, for I am with you. In the garden, we had dislocation and hiding and separation. The antidote to that is don't fear. Why? Because I'm going to sort it out? No. Because you're not going to have problems? No. The reason you're not going to fear is because I am with you. Genesis 15:1. The antidote to fear is the presence of God. That is the antidote. It's not your problems that get taken away. It's not that God fights all your battles for you. The antidote is that he is with us. What does he say to Isaac? Don't fear. As you're with Abraham, I will be with you. To Jacob, the same thing. To Moses, don't worry about going to Pharaoh. Why? Because I will be with you. I will go with you. What does he say to Joshua? As you was with Moses, I will be with you. I will go with you. The presence of God is the thing that we need in order to overcome the stuff that would otherwise destroy you. We need to be aware that we're not isolated, we're not alone, we're not facing stuff by ourselves, but that we have his presence, and that changes everything. Changes everything. I'll mention briefly, because I've mentioned it before here, so I don't want to, regurgitate old stories, but there are enough people that haven't heard it. When Cleo and I first took over Waycroft Hall, September 2016, I was trying to sleep up in my bedroom, woke in the night, and the best way I could describe it is I was paralysed with fear. Paralysed. I think looking back, it was a spiritual thing. It was like, and in my heart, I wanted a dad. I wanted a senior. I wanted someone to help. I didn't just want to have the responsibility of everything we're facing by ourselves. And I was crying out, and I just felt this almost immobilization. They say, isn't it, the fear response, fight, freeze, fight or flight. I was like frozen in it, paralyzed, and somehow, I don't know how it came to, I just thought, oh, Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd. Oh, the Lord is, that's all right then. Oh, phew. Oh, good. Oh, the Lord's looking up. I can go back to sleep again. Because sometimes we need someone with us, this is why people going to the doctor or going to court, it's nice to have someone with you, isn't it? It's nice to have not to be alone. Recently, last Sunday, while you were here worshipping, I had the onerous task of moving I own a third of a boat, and so very fortuitously, the other people that own the other 2/3 decided to move theirs at the same time, otherwise there'd been a problem. But we moved this boat. Now, although I'm qualified as a skipper from years ago, I'm really, really rusty. And I have taken it out with my boys last summer, and I did it myself, and that was all fine and great. But my emotional response this time to doing it was much lighter. Why? Well, because Ben was there. Ben's my favourite nephew, and he's a brilliant yachtsman, and he was the skipper, and he's more experienced than me. And because, I've got only one other. My other favourite nephew got very antsy when I talked about my favourite nephew. I said, but Ed, you're my other favourite nephew. I've got two of them. The only nephews I've got. But because Ben was there, it was like, pressure's off me. I don't need to worry about this, that, or the other, because he's in charge. And it was do you know what I'm saying? We have the Lord. We have the Lord. So why would you come under and partner with anxiety and fear when you've got the Lord with you? That verse that Gary brought earlier, Isaiah 43. Don't fear when you go through all these calamities. Choose to become aware of God's presence with you and let that determine your response. The antidote isn't coping or more, in the world, I don't know what happened in your discussion groups, but the world, what do? Well, they have, more savings, more clothes, more profile, more something else to somehow insulate them. But actually, we just need more of him, or become more aware of him, because he is there anyway. So what happens in this story? The choice that Ahaz faces, I'm going to slip back to 2 Kings, and we're actually going to read it, because I think the story is good and it's not that long. 2 Kings chapter 16. Ahaz, king of Judah. In the 17th year of Pekah, son of Remaliah, Ahaz, son of Jotham, king of Judah, began to reign. Ahaz was 20 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem for 16 years. Unlike David, his father, he did not do what was right in the eyes of the Lord his God. He followed the ways of the kings of Israel, and even sacrificed his son in the fire, engaging in the detestable practices of the nations the Lord had driven out before the Israelites. He offered sacrifices and burned incense at high places, on the hilltops and under every spreading tree. Then Rezin, king of Aram, and Pekah, son of Remaliah, king of Israel, marched up to fight against Jerusalem and besieged Ahaz. That's the story we're in Isaiah 7. But they could not overpower him. At that time, Rezin, king of Aram, recovered. Well, leave out that verse 6. It's a bit of extra military detail. Ahaz sent messengers to say to Tiglath-Pileser, king of Assyria. Now, let me just explain. The two he's facing are two sort of underpowers that are trying to make a triumphant to resist the new and upcoming superpower, Assyria. So Assyria, that is sort of modern-day Iraq, is the up-and-coming superpower. These other two kings that are coming against Ahaz are wanting to rebel and are wanting to take over his nation so that they can use them against them. But what Ahaz does is he goes round their backs up to the superpower and tries to buy off the pressure. Ahaz sent messengers to say to Tiglath-Pileser, king of Assyria, I am your servant and vassal. Come up and save me out of the hand of the king of Aram and the king of Israel, who are attacking me. And Ahaz took the silver and gold found in the temple of the Lord and in the treasuries of the royal palace, and sent it as a gift to the king of Assyria. The king of Assyria complied by attacking Damascus and capturing it. He deported the inhabitants to Kir and put Rezin to death. So it kind of works. Basically, he pays off this superpower to defend him. At what cost? He actually denuded the city that he was supposed to be ruling of its wealth. He put himself under Assyria and so became a vassal state, which led for decades of poverty. He also, and I'm not going to read the rest of that chapter, went up to Damascus, saw what they had in their temple, and thought, oh, well, let's bring that back into Yahweh's temple, and totally desecrated the temple and destroyed it. And you can read on the description of all the things that happened. And he kind of saved his own bacon. But the nation paid for it. It was politically expedient, but it was absolutely disastrous and led to decades of suffering. Because he took the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. He sorted it out. He found a solution. He had a coping mechanism. He came up with a plan. It was not God's plan, and it costs. Sin and suffering go together. Now, in this case, Ahaz did not come to some awful, terrible death on some battlefield. It was his nation that suffered immeasurably for decades and decades. And what I'm trying to say is, with fear choice, there is a choice at the moment where terror would invade. We have a choice. Are we going to listen to God and take by faith the fact that he is with us and do what he says? Or are we going to Ahaz it and allow the pressure that comes in? As I mentioned, 33 years later, his son, extraordinarily, faces almost exactly the same military problem, that Assyria is coming now to take Jerusalem. Isaiah goes out to meet him at the upper aqueduct thingy, but Hezekiah makes a completely different decision, okay? And it just shows that within a generation, things can change. Sons can absolutely sort out the mess that their fathers leave behind. Don't laugh too much, James. Thank you very much. But what I mean is, you do not need to come under your parents' decisions, that he changes it. And Hezekiah he takes Isaiah at his words, and there is an extraordinary, miraculous, supernatural victory described in 2 Kings 19 and 35, which is a very different choice. So there's a choice. That's what I'm saying. There is a choice that we get to make. And I just encourage us, when that pressure comes in, okay, I've got a fear choice. Am I going to try and sort it out? Am I going to struggle in my own strength? Am I going to find some coping mechanisms? Am I going to feed my flesh and just escape, distract? Or am I going to take God's word and push in and say, okay, Lord, where are you? I know by faith that you are with me. That is the antidote to it. Mark Pugh, who's the general director of Elim, spoke recently about camping at the edge of the promise, which is not entering into the promised land. And he said this about fear. It was so good, I'm just going to read it verbatim. Fear reshapes perception. It narrows our vision and magnifies our obstacle. And we reframe it so that caution is now wisdom. He talks about the fear of in the parable of the talents, where we stop moving into what God has called us into. And I'm aware, when we talk about fear, is that sometimes we think of the very obvious ones, fear of flying, or fear of the water, fear of spiders, or whatever. But lots of fears don't describe themselves as fears. They're hidden fears. They're things that we're not even perhaps aware that we're behaving in a certain way. Fear of man. Powerful. We kind of aren't particularly aware. We don't go around thinking that we are terribly frightened of people, but we're acting in a certain way because of fear of rejection, fear of isolation, fear of losing control in some area that we wanted, fear of lack. I'm not going to have it, fear of the bills that are coming. We've even got a new phrase, haven't we? FOMO, fear of missing out in our society. I realised that as I was doing this, I realised I was behaving in a bad way. I was distracting myself because I was frightened of I was frightened of my to-do list before it had even been written. I hadn't even written it and I was still frightened of it, And so I I didn't think, I'm coming under this great fear, but I realized I was behaving in a certain way because I was running from something, not saying, okay, me and the Lord have got this. We can go with courage into it. The antidote is not being an Ahaz. The antidote is, Lord, you are with us. You are here. I'm going to let your presence rule the day. Pastor Richard Wurmbrand was imprisoned by the communist regime in Romania and spent 3 years in solitary confinement, 30 feet underground. And his guards wore felt on the bottom of their shoes so he wouldn't be able to hear their footsteps, totally isolated. He was starved, tortured, and completely isolated in a soundproof cell. He admitted that in the beginning, a frantic fright took hold of him. He was terrified that the sheer brutality would cause his mind and his faith to break. One night, wrapped in darkness and weighing barely 80 pounds, the psychological weight of the isolation became crushing. He realized he could not survive on his own strength. He stopped trying to fight the fear and instead turned his mind fully to the reality of Jesus. He later wrote that he suddenly became so acutely aware of Christ's presence right there in the mud and cold of the cell that the room felt crowded with light. The fear vanished so completely that despite having heavy chains on his ankles, he began to dance around his tiny cell. He did this night after night, completely at peace, realizing that the walls could lock men out, but they could not lock God out. Isn't that good? Now that is an extreme example of where fear is met by a deliberate attempt to come into the presence of God. How would it be if we use this same dynamic in everything we face, individually and corporately, and to ask the Lord, is my behaviour totally formed by faith and anointing and purpose, or have I allowed, subtly and unaware, behaviours to creep in that are actually being controlled by fear, not by faith? And I've got a 3-stage response to that, and I've switched around 2 and 1, because I've put 2 is now going to be 1. Before you even start looking at your fears, I think the safest thing to do is deliberately become aware of the Lord's presence. Because the sign that was given us, Immanuel, and I had the virgin thing is just amazing, that sign, but I'm not going to talk about it because it's a sidetrack. Come and ask me about it, because I did all this research and it's extraordinary and it's brilliant. And all that thing about her being a young woman is right, and I can talk about how extraordinary it is, the Greek and the Septuagint, all the rest of it, but that's not for now. But the sign that Ahaz has given is Immanuel, God is with us. That is the response to fear. So, stage 1, okay, Lord, I'm going to really become aware of your presence. And when he is with you, it is now safe to start looking at your life and your situations. Lord, have I allowed fear of rejection, fear of the doctor's report, fear of the bank statement, fear of people, fear of being left out, to actually cause me to withdraw and hide, not enter in and take the land that is given me? Where has fear slept in unannounced? What have I paused? Where have I allowed excuses? Oh, it didn't work before. It's too late. It's too early. It's too difficult. I am aware that hurt and disappointment stymie people individually and in the church. And actually, it is fear-rooted and fear-based. Sometimes we put a carpet over it and we hide from it. But with the Lord, let's start pulling back and actually having courage, because Joshua was told to be strong and very courageous. We're called to be the same. And then third, you take the first step. You take the first step. Or the first few steps. You start acting in faith with God with you. You know, in the Navy, we had these compressed wool, thick suits that we used for firefighting because the insulation was so thick that the heat from the flames wouldn't come through you. And they're old. Go and ask Tom when they first started, but it was a long time ago. I don't know. Do you know what they're called? The name was deliberate. They're called fear not suits. If you ask a sailor today, what's a fear not suit? I say, oh, that's our firefighting kit. They won't know what it's from. It means fear nothing, fear not. When you're clothed with it, you've got nothing to fear. Isn't that extraordinary? We are supposed to wear the fear not suit of the presence of God. That actually we're not going to be bullyish or clumsy or pushing our way, but there should be an anointing on us that we're not coming under the intimidation that the enemy would use to steal, kill and destroy, because that's his agenda, and make you less. And you might get away with it like Ahaz does, and maybe other people suffer. But you're not going to see the deliverance that his son Hezekiah got. We get to choose. That's why it's called fear choice. Immanuel, God with us. There we go.